The words never indicated that he ever choked her, correct?
Correct.
The words never indicated any other physical act towards her, correct?
Indicated cruel behavior, but I don't know
Acts.
what that was. I don't know what that meant.
I'm talking about acts. For example, did they
Cruel
never...
behavior would be an act.
With regard to that, there was no indication that he ever hit her. Where is your understanding that he hit her on the day that she indicated that she was leaving?
I have no indication other than her word.
Right, and what did she tell you?
On the day she was leaving, wait a minute, on what day that she was leaving?
Remember that you talked about the Mr. Alexander hitting the defendant on the day that she indicated she was going to move back to Wairika.
Correct.
Where did he hit her?
He hit her on the jaw, on the...
And you got that information from the defendant, correct?
Correct.
Do you know somebody by the name of Dan Freeman?
Yes.
And you're
Well, I don't know him. I just read a statement. I don't know him.
And with regard to Dan Freeman, you know that he's somebody that's a friend to the defendant, right?
Correct.
And in that story that we're talking about, the one where she tells him she's going to go to Wairika, and there's this, it appears to be a backhand, correct?
Correct.
He strikes out and lashes at her because he doesn't want her to leave, correct?
Correct.
Objection, speculation as to Mr. Alexander, his reasoning behind hitting.
Sustained.
Well, isn't that what the defendant told you? That Mr. Alexander hit her because she told him that she was going to go to Wairika.
And that he was upset about it.
Right. That's what she told you, right?
Correct.
Again, my question to Dan Freeman, do you know whether or not Mr. Freeman had a conversation with Mr. Alexander prior to this incident about whether or not Mr. Alexander wanted Ms. Arias to even be around in the Mesa area?
I have no information on that.
Would it be important to get that side of the story if, hypothetically speaking, Mr. Freeman were to have testified that it was actually Mr. Alexander that had to have the talk with the defendant about breaking up and leaving?
That would be information that I would like to have.
Let's assume that that's the hypothetical, that Mr. Alexander actually didn't want anything else to do with the defendant, and he's the one that's pushing her away and telling her to leave.
Objection is characterized as testimony.
Overruled.
Let's assume that. And assume that it's Mr. Alexander that's telling her that he wants her to leave. Wouldn't that be something that you would want to know in weighing whether or not what the defendant told you is true involving her statement about telling Mr. Alexander that she was going to Wairika?
It's important, and I have no evidence to support what you're saying.
Right, but let's assume hypothetically that that evidence does exist out there. I'm asking you to assume the truth of it. Assume
You're asking me to assume a hypothetical that I have no evidence of. Is that correct?
And I'm assuming that, and I'm asking you to assume that hypothetical because that person, let's say, came into this court and said that.
All right.
Assume that. If all of that were true, wouldn't that cause a problem in your assessment of this case? Because now, at least, as to this alleged incident, it doesn't seem to be true.
It would be important for me to have that information.
You have that information. Now what are you going to do with it?
What am I going to do with it?
Yes, in terms of your opinion. Does that give you a sense of pause in the firmness of your opinion?
It gives me information that I have to look at, that I have to check out. Does it globally change the picture of domestic violence in regard to the evidence that I have reviewed and seen? It doesn't mean that there was no domestic violence.
So what you're saying, your opinion that changes not, even though that new information were to be provided to you, right?
That Mr. Alexander wanted Miss Arias to leave?
Yes, and go back to Wairika.
There's also no evidence of that.
I'm not saying that there's no evidence of that. I'm asking you to assume that Daniel Freeman came into this courtroom and said that he was there. If you had that, would that give you pause in terms of your opinion?
I would,
Yes or no?
it's not a yes or no question.
Okay,
Mr.
then we'll move on.
Martinez.
Now, with regard to this fight, do you remember about that you told us about the trip to Havasupai?
Correct,
And you spoke to the defendant about it, right?
correct.
And what was her version of the trip to Havasupai? Why don't you tell us what you know about the trip to Havasupai and tell us who started it, if there was a fight?
There was an argument
Between whom?
between Ms. Arias and Mr. Alexander.
Where did it start?
I don't know where it started.
Do you know how it started?
I read two things. I read
Sure.
something that the Freemans wrote, but I would like to look at the information in
Well,
the journal, because I got the information from a journal that I read, and the specifics of that information. I can tell you the gist of that information.
Why don't you give me the gist of that information?
The gist of that information was they had a fight, they had an argument. In fact, Lisa Andrews said he was very negative, that she thought he was overly negative reporting that trip. According to Ms.
Ma'am, I'm just asking about the trip itself. I don't want all this collateral information that you want to provide.
Okay.
I want to know, for example, who started the fight, what was said during the fight, how long the fight lasted, and whether or not the defendant made any comments about the fight in her journal. That's sort of the information that I'm looking at.
Objection, Judge, he just asked for the gist. If he's going to go into detail, then the witness is requested to be able to review the documents.
All right, we're going to take the afternoon recess at this time, ladies and gentlemen. Before I release you for the afternoon break, the court is considering holding trial on Friday, this week, this Friday, April 12, from 9:30 to 12:30. I'm also considering holding trial on April 26th, that's a Friday, from 9 to 4, and on May 3rd, from 10 to 4. During the break, please look at your calendar, and when you come back, I'm going to ask you to let me know if any of those dates would cause a problem for you in being present. Yes. Yes. April 12th, 9:30 to 12:30. April 26th, from 9 to 4. And May 3rd, from 10 to 4. In addition, for your planning purposes, one of the jurors has a conflict this Thursday, so we will be starting trial at 10:30 instead of 9:30. So 10:30 this Thursday. And I know there is a request by another juror for 2 additional days. We are still discussing that. Any other questions about the schedule at this point? All right, you are excused. Please remember the admonition.